I'll never forget the sound of my son's voice that morning. It wasn't joy, it wasn't excitement, it was sheer panic. "Dad, where are you? The wedding is starting, the kids are running wild, and there's no food." He was yelling into the phone, his bride crying in the background. But instead of rushing to help, I sat back in a leather chair at a quiet lakeside lodge, sipping my coffee and breathing in the peace I had bought for myself. Because for once in my life, I chose dignity over duty. I chose me. Just a week earlier, I had overheard my future daughter-in-law telling her sister that I'd be the free babysitter for 15 children during the entire wedding reception. 15, while also preparing the buffet, decorating the hall, and paying thousands out of my retirement savings. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't family. I was a free servant in their eyes. So I changed my plans. And on the most important day of my only son, I should probably start at the beginning, before everything unraveled. My name is Richard Collins. I am 70 years old, a widower for more than a decade, and a father to one son, David. I raised him mostly on my own after my wife passed away from cancer. I worked long hours as a mechanic, saved every penny I could, and tried to give David a life where he would never feel the absence of a mother. When he met Emily 2 years ago, I thought my prayers had been answered. She was polite, charming, and always greeted me with a smile that seemed genuine. For the first time in years, I dared to believe my son had found someone who would cherish him the way I cherished his late mother. So when David and Emily announced their wedding, I threw myself into preparations. I offered to cover the entire buffet, a gesture that would cost me nearly $3,000 from my retirement, but I didn't care. I wanted it to be perfect. I planned the decorations, designed the centerpieces, even coordinated with the vendors. I told myself it was a labor of love, a gift to my son. People my age often spend their savings on cruises or golf trips, but I thought, why not spend it on family? After all, family is supposed to be everything. For months, my small kitchen looked like a battlefield. Lists taped to the refrigerator, cookbooks spread across the counter, and handwritten notes stacked on the table. I was calculating how many pounds of beef I'd need for 150 guests, how many trays of salad, how many desserts. The work didn't scare me. I had built a business with my bare hands, raised a boy into a man, survived the loneliness of losing my wife. Cooking for a wedding, that was nothing compared to those battles. But then, on a Tuesday afternoon, as I was kneading dough for cookies I planned to serve at the reception, I overheard voices drifting from the back patio. At first, I ignored them. My son was on the phone with someone from work, and Emily's sister, Audrey, had come to visit from out of town. I thought they were simply chatting, but then I heard my name. I paused, flour clinging to my fingers, and leaned closer to the window. "Everything is perfectly organized for the kids at the wedding." Emily's sweet voice floated in, the same sweet voice she always used with me. "Richard will watch them all night. About 15 children, from babies to teenagers. He's used to it. That way we adults can enjoy ourselves without interruptions." Audrey laughed loudly. "That's brilliant. The old man will chase around those screaming brats while you drink, dance, and have fun. Perfect. He'll be too busy to get in the way of anything important." I froze. My chest tightened as if someone had slammed a heavy door on me. Was this the same young woman who brought me flowers, who called me Mr. Collins, with respect, who smiled at me in my kitchen? Emily's voice grew colder, sharper. "I told David his dad loves kids. He won't even realize we're using him. It's like having a free professional nanny all night. Plus, it'll keep him out of the important conversations. He won't be hovering or telling old stories about David's childhood." They both laughed. I felt my stomach churn. For 2 years, I had welcomed Emily like the daughter I never had. I had shared family traditions, told her stories of my late wife, let her into the most sacred parts of my home and heart. And here she was, calling me a free nanny, a nuisance, someone to be managed and kept busy like an unwanted relic. When David returned to the patio, Emily switched her voice back to sweet honey. "I was telling Audrey how I organized everything for the kids," she said proudly. "Your dad will watch them all." "My dad is amazing," David said without a clue in his voice. He still has so much energy at his age. We're lucky." Emily smirked, but my son didn't catch it. I pulled away from the window, my hands trembling, flour falling like dust onto the floor. I walked up to my room, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at the family photos lined on my nightstand. David, as a little boy at the beach. His first communion, his college graduation. I thought about the nights I sat awake with a sick child, the birthdays I scraped together money to celebrate, the sacrifices I made so he would never feel poor or unloved. And this was the thanks I got. Over the next days, I smiled as if nothing had happened. When David called to check in on the preparations, I reassured him. "Yes, son, everything is under control. The buffet will be delicious." When Emily came by and said, "Don't stress too much, Mr. Collins, just try to enjoy yourself," I smiled and nodded. Inside, though, a storm was gathering. 70 years of life had taught me one thing. If people treat your love like weakness, they will keep taking until you have nothing left. And I was done being their free labor. I called my oldest friend, Walter. We'd been through thick and thin together, raising kids, losing wives, rebuilding after hardship. "Walt, I need your help," I said flatly. His voice boomed with curiosity. "Richard, what's going on? You sound like a man about to declare war." I told him everything, the conversation I'd overheard, the humiliation, the anger that had seeped into my bones. Walter whistled low. "That girl's a snake. You spent months preparing, and she treats you like a servant? No, Rich, you're not going to let this slide. What's the plan?" And so the plan began to take shape. I cancelled the catering orders I had placed for backup. I cancelled the extra flowers and the decorations. I paid small cancellation fees, but it was worth every penny to see their faces when they realized the free labor they counted on was gone. I packed a small bag, 2 shirts, a pair of slacks, my medications, and my favorite book. And I booked a weekend getaway at a lodge by the lake with Walter. The night before the wedding, David called. "Dad, is everything ready?" "Yes, son. Everything is perfectly ready," I replied calmly, hiding the truth. "Dad, I don't know how to thank you for all this. Emily and I are so grateful." "You don't need to thank me for anything," I said quietly. "Tomorrow will be just as you planned." Oin. When I hung up, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Tomorrow wasn't going to be their perfect day. It was going to be mine. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and cool, the kind of September day when the air feels crisp with possibility. At 5 a.m., I was already awake, not because I had to start roasting meats or mixing salads, but because for the first time in years, I felt light. My body buzzed with an energy I hadn't known since I was a young man. I showered, shaved, and put on a suit I hadn't worn in years. A navy one my late wife always said made me look distinguished. But instead of heading to the church kitchen or the reception hall, I wheeled my small suitcase to the front door, where Walter was already waiting in his old pickup truck, grinning ear to ear. "Ready for your great escape?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "More than ready," I said, climbing in. "Today, I'm not a servant. Today, I'm free." Oh. We drove 2 hours out of the city, past golden fields and winding country roads, until we reached the lodge. It overlooked a glassy lake, surrounded by trees just beginning to turn red and gold with fall. It was quiet, peaceful, the opposite of the chaos that would soon be unfolding at the wedding. Before heading out, I had left a letter on my kitchen table, right where David always sat when he came to visit. "Dear David, by the time you read this, I'll be enjoying some well-deserved rest. I spent months preparing to make your wedding perfect. But I recently learned that my true role was not to be a guest, but the free nanny for 15 children, without anyone bothering to ask me. Since the buffet I promised was also part of my duties, I cancelled everything. I hope you find a solution. I'll be back Sunday evening. With love, but with dignity, Dad." By the time the sun was fully up, Walter and I were checking into the lodge. The receptionist greeted us with coffee and warm pastries. We unpacked, laughed about our daring plan, and booked massages for later that morning. My heart felt lighter with every passing hour, as though a burden I had carried for decades was finally sliding off my shoulders. But by 11 a.m., My phone started buzzing. David's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Then again. By the time I was lying face down on a massage table, the device had buzzed more than 10 times. I switched it off. "Is everything okay?" the masseuse asked, when she noticed my smile. "Perfect," I said. "Please continue." For 3 hours, I forgot the world. The hot stones melted the tension in my shoulders. The facial left my skin glowing. Lunch was served on a terrace overlooking the lake salmon. Fresh bread, a crisp glass of white wine. Walter raised his glass. "To freedom, my friend," and to the look on that bride's face right about now. We clinked glasses. I couldn't help but laugh. By 3 p.m., I decided to turn my phone back on. 17 missed calls from David. 8 from Emily. Dozens of desperate text messages. "Dad, where are you? We need you. Please answer." "Dad, the guests are arriving." "There's no buffet." "What happened?" "Dad, please." Emily is crying. The kids are running everywhere. The parents are furious. "Dad, you can't do this. We'll pay you. Just please come." I took a long sip of wine, dialed David's number, and waited. He answered on the first ring. "Dad, where are you? The wedding is falling apart. The kids are screaming. The caterers are asking about the buffet. Emily's in tears." "Hello, son," I interrupted calmly. "I'm at a lakeside lodge. Just had a chocolate massage, actually." "How's the wedding?" His voice broke with panic. "Dad, this isn't funny. The guests are hungry. There are 15 kids tearing the place apart. You promised—" "No, son." I cut him off, my voice steady. "I promised when I thought I was a guest at your wedding. When I learned I was just your unpaid nanny, I changed my mind." There was silence on the other end, then muffled sobs. Emily's voice came through, shrill and broken. "Richard, you can't do this to us. There are 150 people here. We have nothing to feed them." "Emily," I said softly, "I'm 70 years old. I don't run buffets and daycare centers for free. Labor deserves respect. You wanted me to work, but you didn't even ask me. That's not love, that's use." "But the children," she cried. "Their parents were told someone would watch them." "I imagine that must be difficult," I said. "Don't you have a sister? Audrey, was it? I heard she thinks I'm quite good with children." The silence was exquisite. Then a stammer. How do you know about Audrey?" "Oh, sweetie," I said. "Walls have ears, especially when people gossip loudly on my patio." David came back on the line, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Dad, did you hear us?" "On the patio. I heard everything, son. I heard how your bride called me a free professional nanny, how Audrey said at least I'd finally be useful, how Emily laughed that I'd be too busy to eat the buffet I was paying for." "Yes, David, I heard it all." His silence was heavier than any words. "Dad, please," he whispered, "we'll pay you. $500. Just help us get through tonight." "Is what?" I laughed, a deep, free laugh that startled even me. 500? That's what you think my dignity costs? I already spent 3,000 preparing food for your guests, and you want me to trade my self-respect for $500? Emily shrieked in the background. 2,000 then. Please, we'll pay you 2,000. "Emily," I said, my tone firm but calm, "if you had 2,000 to pay me today, you had money to hire a real caterer weeks ago. You didn't want to spend it. You wanted me to, and you wanted me to work for free on top of it. That's not family. That's exploitation." Her voice turned venomous. "You selfish old man. You ruined my wedding." "No," I replied evenly. "You ruined your own wedding when you decided saving money mattered more than treating your husband's father with respect." I simply refused to play along. The background was chaos, children crying, adults shouting, a crash that sounded suspiciously like a cake falling. David groaned. "Dad, one of the kids just knocked over the wedding cake." Another one disappeared under the main table. "The parents are furious. Please, I'm begging you. Come back. We'll forgive you." "Forgive me?" I echoed with disbelief. For what refusing to be your servant, son? I'm not the one who needs forgiveness. The line was silent again, broken only by muffled yelling. Finally, David whispered, Dad, please don't do this to me. It's my wedding. No, son, I said quietly. You did this to yourself. You treated me like an employee, not a father. And today you're learning what happens when you forget the difference. I hung up. Walter raised his glass of wine again, a sly smile tugging at his lips. Well, Rich, I'd say that was masterful. I leaned back in my chair, the lake shimmering before us, and felt freer than I had in decades. For the first time in years, Walt, I said, I'm not just someone's father or someone's servant. I'm me. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the water, my phone buzzed again, dozens of messages, dozens of missed calls, some from David, some from unknown numbers, other relatives, perhaps even parents of those children. I ignored them all, because for once in my 70 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I chose to do, and I had no regrets. The wedding reception that I had walked away from turned into chaos, and I didn't need to be there to imagine it. By the time the sun had set over the lake, my phone was flooded with messages, pleas, accusations, even attempts at emotional blackmail. Walter and I sat in the lodge's quiet dining room, a bottle of red wine between us, while my phone vibrated like an angry hornet on the table. Are you going to answer any of those? Walter asked, cutting into his steak with the calm of a man who had seen his share of storms. Not yet, I said, pushing the buzzing phone aside. Every ring is proof I finally stood up for myself. Still, curiosity eventually got the better of me. I scrolled through the messages. Dad, please. The parents are furious. Some have already left with their kids. Richard, you ruined my life. Everyone is saying the wedding is a disaster. Mr. Collins, this is Michael, Emily's father. Please, I beg you, come help. My daughter is devastated. Uncle Richard, it's Rosa. We heard what happened. We're on your side. The contradictions made me shake my head. Some relatives cursed me, while others applauded me. Some pleaded for mercy, while others quietly admitted they admired what I'd done. It felt strange, being both the villain and the hero of the same story. By 9 p.m. I gave in and called David. He answered immediately, his voice hoarse. Dad, it was a disaster. We had to order pizza for the guests. $1,200 on pizza, and half the parents left angry. Tiffany says she'll never forgive me. She says you ruined her wedding. I sighed, swirling the wine in my glass. No, son, I didn't ruin anything. You and Emily did, the moment you decided I was your unpaid help. Actions have consequences. Dad, please don't talk like that, he begged. I know we messed up, but I thought you loved me. That sentence cut me deeper than I expected. For all his faults, David was still my boy. But love, I reminded myself, doesn't mean allowing disrespect. I do love you, I said quietly, and because I love you, I won't let you keep treating me like a servant. You'll thank me one day. When I hung up, Walter leaned back, studying me with sharp eyes. That hurt, didn't it? Yes, I admitted. But sometimes love has to hurt in order to heal. The next morning, I woke up to the kind of peace I hadn't felt in decades. No alarms, no obligations, no rushing to cook or clean. I sat on the terrace with a cup of coffee, watching the mist rise from the lake. Walter joined me, yawning. You look 10 years younger, he said. Maybe I shed 10 years of other people's expectations, I replied. After breakfast, we decided to explore the hiking trails around the lodge. For hours, I breathed in the scent of pine and earth, listening to the crunch of leaves underfoot. Every step reminded me of something I had forgotten long ago. Life could be simple, if you allowed it to be. When we returned, my phone was buzzing again. This time, I forced myself to read the newer messages. Dad, the wedding is over. Tiffany says she can't forgive me for what you did. She's threatening to move away. Richard, please. It was just a misunderstanding. Don't throw away our family over this. Mr. Collins, I'm Carol, mother of one of the children at the wedding. I want you to know many of us parents were upset. We were told someone would watch the kids, but no one did. Honestly, what they did to you was wrong. I support your decision. I showed the last message to Walter. He chuckled. See, even strangers know you were right. That's got to count for something. It did, more than I could put into words. When I finally returned home Sunday evening, the house felt different, as if it had been holding its breath. I made tea, settled into my old armchair, and waited. Sure enough, by 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. David stood there, alone, his shoulders slumped. "Hi, Dad," he said softly. "Come in," I replied. We sat in the living room, him on the sofa, me in my chair. The silence stretched until he finally spoke. "Dad, I owe you an apology." I folded my hands. "I'm listening. Tiffany and I. We talked. At first she was furious, but when I told her exactly what you overheard, she realized how bad it sounded. I realized it too. I've been treating you like staff, not family. For 2 years I just assumed you'd always say yes. I never thought about whether you wanted to." I studied him. He looked ashamed, older somehow, as if the weight of his choices had finally settled on him. "David," I said slowly, "I need to ask you something directly. Do you see me as your father or as your personal employee?" He lowered his head. "Dad, until yesterday, I didn't realize how blurred that line had become, but I see it now, and I hate myself for it." "Good," I said, "because things are going to change. From now on, you ask me, not assume, and if I say no, you accept it without guilt trips. Do you understand?" "Yes, Dad," he said, his voice trembling. "And one more thing," I added. "The next time your wife speaks badly about me, you defend me. You don't stand by in silence." He nodded. "You're right. I should have done that from the start." We sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. Less like a wall between us, more like a bridge slowly being rebuilt. Tiffany didn't show up that night, but 3 days later, David called. "Dad, Emily wants to apologize in person. Can she come by tomorrow?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, but another part whispered that forgiveness wasn't about excusing her behavior, it was about reclaiming my peace. 4 o'clock, I said finally. "And only if she's sincere." The next day, Emily arrived right on time. She looked nothing like the polished young woman I had come to know. No makeup, simple clothes, her face pale. She sat on the sofa, fidgeting, and finally spoke. "Mr. Collins, I need to apologize. What I said about you was cruel and wrong. I was insecure, and I tried to make myself feel bigger by making you smaller. I realize now how disrespectful I've been." I studied her carefully. For the first time, her tears didn't look rehearsed. "Emily," I said, "do you truly want a relationship with me, or are you just trying to fix things for David's sake?" "At first, I just wanted to fix things," she admitted. "But now, I see that I lost the chance to have a second father figure. I don't want to lose that again." Her honesty surprised me. I let out a long breath. "I'll give you one chance," I said. "One. Respect me as David's father, not as free labor. If you cross that line again, there won't be another chance." She nodded quickly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I understand. Thank you." When she left, I sank back into my chair, exhausted but strangely hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, the lesson had sunk in. The weeks following the wedding felt like walking across a bridge that might crack at any moment. Everything between us, me, David, and Emily, was fragile. I could see the effort, but I could also see the hesitation. David called me more often, not to ask for favors, but to talk about ordinary things, how his job was going, how the weather reminded him of our fishing trips, how the new house needed repairs. He was relearning how to be my son. Emily, on the other hand, was a puzzle. At first she kept her distance. Her text messages were polite but stiff, as if every word had been carefully rehearsed. "Good morning, Mr. Collins. How are you feeling today? Or would you like me to bring you some homemade soup?" It was almost comical. She sounded more like a neighbor, trying to stay on good terms than a daughter-in-law. But underneath the politeness, I sensed fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing. Fear of crossing a boundary again. For the first time in years, my days were my own. I no longer woke up to panicked calls asking me to run errands. I no longer found myself roped into projects I never agreed to. I started taking long walks in the park, polishing up the old Chevy in my garage, and even sitting down with books I hadn't opened in years. Silence filled my house, and at first it felt unnatural. But slowly, it began to feel like freedom. 2 weeks after the wedding, David called. His voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. "Dad, I need to ask you something. And if you say no, I'll understand." I paused, bracing myself. Old wounds make you suspicious. "Go ahead, son. It's Emily's birthday this Saturday. I've already hired a caterer, booked the venue, handled the invitations. I could use your help with the decorations. Not to do everything, just to give me advice. I'll pay you for your time if that makes it easier." And for a moment, I didn't know what to say. The man who once handed me lists of tasks as if I were staff was now asking gently, offering me a way out, even offering payment. He had finally understood. "David," I said slowly, "you don't need to pay me. Helping with decorations is something I'd be glad to do as a gift, but I appreciate that you asked." Instead of assuming, the relief in his voice was audible. "Thanks, Dad. And if it's too much, just tell me and I'll find someone else." That small concession, a real choice, meant more to me than all the apologies in the world. On the morning of Emily's birthday, I drove to their home carrying a box of fresh flowers and golden balloons. The house buzzed with preparations. David had already set up tables, strung lights across the backyard, and arranged the food the caterer had delivered. "What do you think?" he asked nervously, wiping sweat from his brow. I scanned the space, remembering the suffocating hours I had once spent decorating their wedding hall. But this time was different. This time, it wasn't all on my shoulders. "It looks good," I said honestly, "but let's move the lights lower, it'll feel warmer, and these flowers will add a nice touch near the entrance." We worked together for hours, stringing lights, arranging flowers, adjusting chairs. We laughed when we got tangled in the wires, teased each other about our clumsiness. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't being used. I was part of a team again, a father helping his son, not a servant, fulfilling duties. When Emily arrived that evening, expecting nothing more than a quiet dinner, the surprise stopped her cold. Friends shouted, "Happy birthday!" Lights glowed across the yard, tables gleamed, and David beamed with pride. Emily covered her mouth, her eyes welling up. She threw her arms around David. "I can't believe you did all this." Dad helped me with the decorations," David said proudly. "He has the best eye for these things." Emily turned to me, tears shining. "Thank you, Mr. Collins. Everything looks beautiful." This time, I believed her gratitude. It wasn't laced with expectation. It wasn't a mask. Throughout the party, I noticed small but important details. Emily introduced me to her friends as David's father, not as the man who had cooked the food. She seated me at the main table with family, not tucked away near the kitchen. When a guest complimented the decorations, Emily didn't take credit. She pointed straight at me. "That was all Richard. He has a real talent." I can't explain how much those little gestures meant. Respect isn't always about grand apologies. It's in the details, the small acknowledgements that say, "I see you, I value you." Still, old wounds don't vanish overnight. At one point in the evening, a relative joked, "Richard, don't get too comfortable. They'll have you planning the baby shower next." The words stung more than I expected. For a moment I froze, unsure if I was being mocked again. But then David, my son, stepped forward. "No, Dad's not in charge of anything anymore. If he wants to help, he'll choose. If not, we'll handle it ourselves." The room went quiet. And in that silence, I felt something shift. For the first time, David defended me. He had finally grown into the man I always hoped he would be. A month later, Emily called me directly. "Not David, Emily. Mr. Collins, could we have lunch? Just you and me." I hesitated. My instinct was to protect myself, to avoid another performance, but curiosity won. We met at a quiet cafe near my home. She was nervous, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "Since the wedding, I've been going to therapy," she began. I realized I have deep issues with parents. My mum died when I was 15. My dad remarried quickly, and his new wife never cared for me. I felt abandoned, and when I met you, I didn't know how to handle having a father figure again. So I did the worst thing. I mocked you to make myself feel in control. Her honesty hit me harder than any insult she had ever thrown. I'm not telling you this as an excuse, she continued, her eyes glistening. I just want you to understand why I acted the way I did. I know it was wrong, and I don't want to lose the chance to have a real relationship with you. I let her words settle. For years, I had tried to please her, thinking that was the way to build a bond. But bonds built on sacrifice alone are brittle. Bonds built on truth might actually last. Emily, I said quietly, I can't replace your mother, but I can be your father-in-law. That means respect, honesty, and boundaries. If you want that, I'll give you one chance, but just one. Oh, she nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. I'll take it, and I'll prove it, not with words, but with actions. For the first time, I saw not the manipulative bride I once despised, but a young woman trying desperately to heal. Life settled into a steadier rhythm after that. Emily sent fewer stiff texts and more genuine ones. David stopped assuming my help and started planning things himself. I still kept my guard up, but I also allowed myself to breathe. Then came the next test. One Saturday afternoon, David called. Dad, Emily and I want to go to a concert next weekend. Could you watch the dog for us? I smiled. It was small, harmless. Yes, I'd be glad to. The following month, another call. Dad, we're swamped with work. Could you cook something for us this week? My chest tightened. This was the trap. I took a deep breath. No, David, I can't. If you want food, order takeout. My kitchen is for me now. There was a long pause on the line. Then David said, Okay, Dad, I understand. Thanks for being honest. That moment mattered. More than the birthday party, more than the apologies, because it proved they finally respected my no. 6 months after the wedding disaster, David and Emily invited me to dinner again. Over dessert, David's grin spread wide. Dad, we have news. Emily's pregnant. My heart stopped. Then it swelled. For all the conflict, for all the bitterness, this was still the family I had fought for. Emily reached across the table, her eyes soft. We want you to be a part of this baby's life, but only as much as you choose. We'll never assume. If you want to babysit, wonderful. If you'd rather just visit sometimes, that's fine too. You get to decide. I swallowed hard, my throat tight with emotion. That's all I ever wanted, the freedom to choose. And for the first time in years, I truly believed them. When I first learned that Emily was pregnant, I felt emotions collide inside me in ways I hadn't anticipated. There was joy, of course, the kind of joy that bubbles up from deep within, the kind you can't fake, even if you wanted to. The idea of becoming a grandfather at 70 gave me new energy, almost as if life had offered me a second chance at fatherhood. But tangled with that joy was fear, a deep and gnawing fear that old patterns might resurface. I worried that my role as grandfather might simply become the free babysitter. I worried that all the hard-won respect I had gained after the wedding would collapse the moment a new child entered the picture. I promised myself something that night as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I would love this grandchild fiercely, but I would not lose myself again. As Emily's pregnancy progressed, I began to notice subtle changes in her. She was softer, more vulnerable, more willing to let me in. She invited me to doctor's appointments, not with entitlement, but with shy uncertainty, her eyes searching mine for a hint of rejection. Would you like to come? She asked one afternoon, her voice tentative. It was not a command. It was a choice. I accepted, and as I sat in that small exam room, listening to the rhythmic thump of my granddaughter's heartbeat for the first time, I felt tears sting my eyes. I thought of David as a baby, how small and fragile he had been, and how I had carried the weight of raising him alone. And now here I was, in another chapter of life, given the chance to hold the future again in my hands. Painting the nursery became our first test as a new family. David had chosen a pale yellow color, cheerful and warm. When I arrived, the room was chaos, paint rollers dripping, trays splattered across the carpet, patches of uneven color streaked on the walls. David laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "We tried, Dad. Really we did. But I think we're in over our heads." Emily sat nearby in a chair, her swollen feet propped on a stool, directing the two of us like a foreman. I rolled up my sleeves and picked up a roller. "Let's do this together," I said. And so we did. For hours, we painted side by side, our laughter echoing through the house. Every now and then Emily would smile, her eyes misting over as she watched us. "Mr. Collins, sorry, Dad. I'm glad you're here." The word Dad caught in her throat at first, as though it were foreign on her tongue. But when it came out, it didn't feel forced. It felt real. It felt like a small piece of the bridge between us had been repaired. The day Lily was born is etched in my memory as vividly as the day David was born. The hospital room was filled with the sharp scent of antiseptic, the rhythmic beeping of machines, and the frantic energy of doctors and nurses moving swiftly. When the cry finally came, a thin, piercing wail that cut through the chaos, my heart nearly burst out of my chest. David wept openly, clutching Emily's hand, and when they placed the tiny bundle in her arms, I felt something shift inside me. When it was my turn to hold her, I was almost afraid to touch her. She was so small, so delicate, her skin soft as silk, her fingers curling instinctively around my own. "Hello, Lily," I whispered, my voice breaking. In that moment, all the anger and bitterness of the past seemed to melt away. Love filled the cracks, flooding me with warmth I hadn't felt in decades. But with Lily's arrival came new challenges. Parenthood is exhausting, and I watched as David and Emily were consumed by fatigue. Their voices trembled with desperation when they called. "Dad, could you come by and watch Lily for a few hours so we can nap?" Emily asked one afternoon, her voice heavy with exhaustion. My heart softened instantly. I wanted to help. But then, almost as if she remembered the past, Emily quickly added, "Only if you want to. If you can't, we'll figure it out ourselves." That single sentence made all the difference. For the first time, I felt respected in my role. I agreed, and for the next 3 hours, I held Lily against my chest, rocking her gently as she slept. The weight of her tiny body on mine reminded me of nights long ago when David had fallen asleep in my arms after long days in the shop. It was peace, pure and simple. Still, I kept my boundaries. When Emily texted late one night asking, "Can you stay overnight so we can rest?" I took a deep breath and replied firmly, "No. My health comes first. I'll help tomorrow afternoon instead." I expected pushback, maybe even resentment, but her reply came quickly. "Thank you. We understand." Relief washed over me. They were learning. 3 months later, a bigger test came. David was offered a sudden work trip out of town. Emily panicked, her voice shaking when she called me. "Dad, I don't know how I'm going to handle Lily by myself for 3 days. Could you stay here and help?" Memories of the wedding flooded back, the overwhelming demands, the feeling of being trapped. My chest tightened, but I remembered my promise to myself. "I'll come during the day," I said calmly. "I'll help with Lily so you can rest. But at night I need to be in my own bed. You're her mother, Emily. You'll manage." She was quiet for a long time. I thought I had pushed her too far. But then she nodded, her eyes glistening with determination. "You're right. I can do this. I just needed to hear it." And she did. For 3 nights, she cared for Lily alone, calling me only once to ask about a fever. When David returned, she hugged me at the door, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for being honest. You forced me to believe in myself." It struck me then, by setting limits, I wasn't rejecting them. I was teaching them. By refusing to carry all the weight, I was showing them they were strong enough to carry their own. The next major challenge came at Lily's baptism. This time, Emily's family took charge of the reception, a fact that should have comforted me. But a week before the event, her sister Audrey called me. Her voice was saccharine, but the undertone was familiar. "Richard, You're so good with food. Could you prepare a few trays for the reception? Nothing too big, just some appetizers. The old me might have sighed and agreed, afraid of disappointing people. But not this time. My voice was steady, unwavering. No, Audrey, this is your family's event. I'll be there as a grandfather, not as a caterer. There was silence on the line, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, she muttered, "Fine." On the day of the baptism, I arrived in a clean suit, carrying only a small gift wrapped in soft pink paper. No trays, no boxes, no exhaustion etched on my face. For once, I was simply a guest, a proud grandfather. When relatives asked if I had cooked, I smiled politely. Not this time. Today, I'm just here to celebrate. And I saw David watching me from across the room, pride shining in his eyes. Emily, too, seemed relieved. At one point, she leaned over and whispered, "I'm glad you said no. We needed to handle this ourselves." It was a small victory, but an important one. As Lily grew, so did my role. I babysat once a week, teaching her songs, reading her stories, and rocking her to sleep. I delighted in her giggles, her tiny hands tugging at my shirt, the way her eyes lit up when she saw me. But I also said no when I needed to. I refused overnight stays. I declined to cook for parties, and each time, instead of resentment, I saw understanding in their eyes. One evening, after I tucked Lily into her crib, David pulled me aside. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Dad, I used to think love meant doing everything for family, no matter what. But now I see it's also about boundaries. You taught me that. You saved us from repeating the same mistakes." My throat tightened. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "And you, son, taught me that love can survive anger, disappointment, even betrayal, as long as we're willing to change." For the first time in years, he hugged me without guilt or tension, just pure love. And as I stood there in that quiet nursery, with my son's arms around me and my granddaughter sleeping peacefully nearby, I knew the truth. Love with boundaries is not weaker, it is stronger, because it is chosen, not assumed. It had been over a year since Lily was born, and for the first time in decades, I felt peace settle into my life like a gentle snowfall. My relationship with David had healed in ways I once thought impossible. Emily, too, had surprised me. Her sharp edges had softened, her gratitude more genuine with each passing month. I had found my rhythm as a grandfather, present, loving, but never enslaved by duty. I thought the worst storms were behind us. But life has a way of testing you, especially when it senses you're finally standing tall. The test came during a family reunion. David and Emily decided to host a summer barbecue in their backyard. Relatives from both sides showed up. Emily's extended family, some distant cousins I barely knew, and a few old friends. The air was thick with the smell of grilled meat, children's laughter, and the low hum of conversation. Lily toddled around with her tiny shoes, clutching a toy rabbit, and every time she wobbled too far, David was there to scoop her up. Watching him father his daughter with such tenderness made my chest swell with pride. But peace rarely lasts long at family gatherings. Halfway through the evening, Emily's cousin, a brash man named Greg, pulled me aside. He was in his 40s, overweight, with a booming voice and a tendency to treat everyone like they owed him something. I barely knew him, but he leaned close, the smell of beer heavy on his breath. "Richard," he said, clapping me on the back as though we were old pals. "I hear you're the guy who knows how to organize everything. You practically ran David's wedding." I stiffened, but kept my voice polite. "That's not exactly how it happened." He chuckled, ignoring my tone. "Well, I've got great news. My daughter's getting married this fall, and we could really use someone like you. You know, someone to cook, decorate, keep things in line. You'd be perfect." I stared at him, incredulous. "Are you asking me to plan your daughter's wedding?" "Not asking," he said, grinning. "I'm telling you, family helps family, right? And everyone says you're great at this stuff. Think of it as your contribution." The arrogance in his voice ignited something in me. I thought of all the sleepless nights, the humiliation I endured at David's wedding, the tears, the exhaustion, the feeling of being used. My jaw tightened. "No," I said firmly. He blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean, no? Come on, it's not that big of a deal. You're retired. You've got time." I met his gaze without flinching. "No, Greg, I'm not your free caterer, decorator, or babysitter. Hire professionals. I'm here to be a guest, not your employee." Blue. His smile faltered, replaced by irritation. "Wow, I didn't realize you were so selfish. I thought family meant stepping up." "Family means respect," I said evenly, "and respect starts with asking, not assuming." The conversation drew the attention of others nearby. Emily's sister Audrey drifted closer, her usual smirk playing on her lips. "What's the matter, Richard? Too tired to pitch in? You used to be so helpful." The air grew heavy. My heart pounded, but I stood my ground. I was helpful because I was guilted into it. Not anymore. Just then, David appeared, Lily perched on his hip. He had caught enough of the conversation to understand. His face darkened, and for the first time in his life, I saw him truly angry on my behalf. "Greg," he said sharply, "my father isn't your free labor. He's 71 years old. He's earned the right to sit back and enjoy family events. If you want a caterer, hire one. If you want decorations, pay for them. But don't you dare treat my dad like a servant." Greg tried to laugh it off, but David didn't waver. Emily stepped forward too, her voice steady. "My dad is right. Respect has to go both ways. If you can't see that, maybe you shouldn't expect our support at all." Audrey scoffed, muttering something under her breath, but the damage was done. Everyone had heard. The tension broke the chatter around us, and suddenly the backyard was silent. All eyes were on Greg, who shifted uncomfortably, his bravado crumbling. "Fine," he muttered, his voice low. "Forget I asked." He slunk away, leaving behind a stunned silence. David turned to me then, his eyes fierce but warm. "Dad, I'm sorry you had to go through that. But I want you to know, you'll never stand alone again. Not with me. Not with Emily. Not with Lily. We're your family, and we'll protect you the way you've always protected us." Emily nodded, tears shimmering in her eyes. "You taught us how to respect boundaries, and now it's our turn to enforce them." For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, my vision blurred. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised alone, the man who once took me for granted, now standing tall as my defender. I looked at Emily, the woman who had once laughed at me, now choosing to stand beside me. And I looked at Lily, who giggled in David's arms, blissfully unaware of the storm that had just passed. I felt something break free inside me, not anger, not resentment, but release. Years of being taken for granted seemed to wash away in that moment. I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting alone. The rest of the evening shifted after that confrontation. People looked at me differently, not as a tool to be used, but as someone who had drawn a line and held it. Some relatives came up quietly to pat my shoulder, whispering, "Good for you." Others avoided me, embarrassed or perhaps guilty for how they had once treated me, but none of that mattered. What mattered was my family, David, Emily, and Lily, standing with me. Later that night, as the fireflies danced in the yard and the last guests trickled out, David sat beside me on the porch. He handed me a glass of iced tea and sighed. "Dad, I never realized how much you carried all those years. I was blind to it. I thought love meant you'd always say yes. But you showed me that real love isn't about using someone, it's about respecting them." I nodded, my voice thick. "And you, son, showed me that people can change, that even when things seem broken beyond repair, there's still hope." He placed his hand on mine, firm and steady. "We're a team now, always." And in that moment, with the stars above us and the sound of Lily's soft laughter drifting through the open window, I knew something with absolute certainty. I had not only regained my dignity, but I had also gained something even more precious, a family that truly understood the meaning of respect. Looking back on everything, I realized the hardest part wasn't being taken advantage of. It wasn't even the exhaustion, the humiliation, or the endless work. The hardest part was learning to say one small but powerful word, no. For decades, I thought love meant sacrificing myself completely, giving until I had nothing left. I thought that being a father meant erasing my own needs. But life has taught me something different. Love without boundaries is not love, it's slavery. When I finally said no first at the wedding, then again and again in the small choices that followed, I discovered something miraculous. My son didn't stop loving me. My daughter-in-law didn't walk away. In fact, the opposite happened. They learned to respect me, and in turn, they learned to respect themselves. By setting boundaries, I gave them the chance to grow into stronger partners, stronger parents, and stronger people. Now, when I hold my granddaughter Lily in my arms, I don't feel bitterness or regret. I feel freedom. I know that every moment I spend with her is a choice, not an obligation. I know that my love has weight because it is given freely, not demanded. That is the greatest gift I can pass on to her, that love should never come at the cost of one's dignity. So to anyone listening to my story, let me tell you this. You are not selfish for setting boundaries. You are not cruel for saying no. Respecting yourself is the first step toward teaching others how to respect you. Whether you're a parent, a spouse, or a friend, your value is not measured by how much you give away, but by how much you cherish yourself while still loving others. If my story has touched you, if it has reminded you of your own strength, I ask you to stay with me. Let's keep sharing stories that heal, stories that remind us that even in pain, there is always hope. Subscribe, support, and walk with me on this journey, because none of us are alone. Not when we choose dignity, not when we choose love with boundaries, and not when we choose to believe in our own worth.